Unfiltered, uncensored, and unapologetic. This is the Retail Warzone Podcast.
All right, guys. So let's get started. Tonight, I have Jenny with us. Discovered her on the anti-work Reddit. Immediately reached out to her, basically begged, said, hey, look, we've been wanting to get an HR person on here for ever. So we got one. She's been in the industry 20 plus years. The one thing I do want to throw out there, and she can speak on it because she's got experiences, from people she worked with, but she didn't do employee relations. And if I'm not mistaken, Jenny, you did, your specialty was development programs, recruiting employees, employee engagement, analytics, and strategy, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I guess first we'll go over some of the points you made in your post, and then we will kind of devolve from there. So the floor is yours.
I love devolving. It's one of my favorite activities. So first, my name's Jenny. I've been in HR since I was 19, and I'm in my mid 40s. So do the math there. I didn't want to go into HR. I just have a very expensive medical condition. I'm in the United States, and I got hired as an administrative assistant in that department and just kind of worked my way up. I've neatly and strategically avoided doing the employee relations job. And that's probably the bread and butter HR job most people think of. It's the job where if someone has a complaint or a concern, or they get terminated or put on corrective action, that's the employee relations HR job. And I've never done it. I have learned a lot about it just by working with the people who do have to do that job. But any questions about that sort of thing, honestly, even if had I done it for the past 24 or 26 or whatever years, it's also organizational specific that I couldn't answer them. What I did specialize in is firstly, analytics. I'm actually certified in a number of different statistical things, and I'm very good at analytics. I'm very good at strategy, and then I kind of segued those into talent development. So it became kind of apparent to me at some point in my career that the math was saying, if you do these things for people, they can flourish and move up. And I kind of found a way to just kind of make a job out of that. So I guess that's the kind of introduction to me. I've recently been laid off. I'm on payroll till the end of this year. I have insurance and pay through June, but I don't have any work to do after the first. And honestly, they stopped giving me work to do as soon as they told me I was laid off. So
wow.
Yeah.
All right, so your anti-work post, there were a couple things, all right, and I'm just going to go over the bullet points. I mean, there was one in there that was kind of, I didn't think was extremely relevant to the conversation. It was the third point, but the first and second, and then your last point were extremely important to what we talk about here. Mm-hmm. So number one was stop quitting, make them fire you, basically. Number two, you referenced who does the posts on like Glassdoor.
Yeah.
And then the last one, which is huge for this gang. And I actually wrote this down because I thought this was excellent. And said, last and most important, big companies fear unions for a good reason. They slow down the profit machine. However, these big union busting companies have forgotten that workers control the unions. So have the unions and the workers. Read up on how unions work, form one, and use it. So, if you would elaborate on those points, please, ma'am.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with that last one because I feel like that's the most critical. I believe in full disclosure, and I will tell you that I have been the HR person, and I was actually the best HR person at my organization, which is a huge company. You would know the name if I'd say it, which I won't. I have been the person in charge of, and I'm using air quotes, educating employees about unions. I'm extremely pro-union in my personal life. Like, I really want unions to work and be effective. But over the past, say, 10 to 15 to 20 years of being in charge of educating employees about union, I've noticed a trend. And here's how it seems to work out. What happens is a workforce unionizes. They pay dues to the union. Those dues are the only source of revenue for the union. The only thing that pays the salary for the people who run the union, the stewards, or not the stewards, the administrators, etc. And then the rest of the funds go to lobbying. There's no other source of revenue for unions. And I became very jaded about that. I was like, these are the people who are supposed to be representing employees. But all I see them doing in my life, is taking 2 to 3% of salary for dues and then not lobbying for any systemic change. I mean, a local can do great things for their members, right? But these are the people who got us the 40-hour work week. They're the people who got us no child labor. And that was awesome in the 20s and 30s and 40s, but now it's 2021. And where are the unions? Why aren't they lobbying for a 24-hour work week to be considered full-time? Why aren't they lobbying for a $30 an hour minimum wage? They're not doing anything. They're just collecting dues and maintaining the status quo. And I understand you might have a great local union, right, that's doing right by you, but largely as an organization, they're not actually going to Congress or going to Washington and asking for systemic changes that we greatly need to give our workforce a fair shake. So I've been largely anti-union for that reason, not because I don't want workers to have rights, but because I don't think unions have been fighting for them. But here's where I just learned something a couple weeks ago. The John Deere thing was amazing. Mm-hmm. The union stewards sat down with that company. They hammered out a deal that screwed over the union members, the employees of John Deere and the members of that union. And he took it back. The union steward took it back to that group of members, that group of employees, and they told him no. They got to vote no. And I'm just sitting here like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be this HR professional who's super knowledgeable about how unions work. And that's when I learned that the union members could say no to a deal they didn't like.
Yep.
Just because the union rep agrees to it doesn't mean the members have to. And what happened with John Deere, I mean, I recommend everyone read up on this. It was amazing. They got such great concessions out of the company through using their union. But what's really funny is their union didn't do it for them. The union members did. Their union came back with crap deal after crap deal after crap deal. And the members are the ones who held the line. So when I say form a union and understand how they work, I'm saying it from a place of I'm supposed to be an expert. And I just learned a couple months ago, you can tell your union rep you hate the deal.
Yep. I know we had a gentleman on a few weeks ago who from Target Workers Unite, and they did like a self-organized thing. And that was something that I was unaware of, is that, if you get enough people together, you don't have to go through like a big union thing. You can kind of do your own thing. It's that whole strength in numbers kind of movement. And they were able to actually make some changes and get some concessions in the store they were in without having any like official union backing. So I think that goes kind of hand in hand.
No, that's one of the things I think people don't know. And one thing I did educate people on, and of course I was educating people from the HR side, but it was like, hey, if you take group demands from your employees and you accept those demands as valid demands and they deliver them as a group, you've just basically by the NLRA, you've let them form a union. You don't have to join, the Service Workers Union of America or the IBEW or the CWA or any of those unions. You can actually just make one happen by speaking collectively.
Yep. I got a real quick question for you. Iris asks, and I'm pretty sure we know the answer to this: who has been more successful in the last 20 years, unions or corporations?
With corporations.
Excellent.
I mean, it's obviously. Hold on, I'm gonna talk more about that, just a little bit. And this isn't from the HR side. This is from my general person side. And keeping in mind, I'm mid 40s, started working, before I was 20, etc. All of these amazing technological advances we've seen, right, means that I can work 40 hours a week right now and provide the same result as someone who worked 10 hours a week 50 years ago. Productivity has been massively boosted by technology. But those productivity boosts are only going to the corporations. The workers who are doing the work are being more productive and not getting more money.
Yep, that actually started in 1970. In 1970, they were both hand in hand, and then it was to the moon with productivity and to the dirt with the workforce. And there was something else on anti-work that I had posted that I'd never looked at it this way. We hear the argument that, okay, minimum wage hasn't been raised in 12 years. Okay, sure. But then I saw somebody had flipped it in a different way that was much more profound. It said, okay, in 1938, when minimum wage was created, it was 25 cents an hour. In 83 years, it's only went up $7.
Yeah, so I struggled using just plain numbers to measure how unfair this is, because I think it's more unfair than that. Only because if I'm looking at $7, I'm like, well, yeah, okay, that's $7. But if we start looking at percentages, right, like. If we look at percentages, if we want to math this properly, keeping in mind I have a very strong analytics background, we're not going to look at the dollar amount the minimum wage went up. We are going to look at things like how much did profits go up? What's the impact of inflation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you do that and you factor in all those things and convert them to percentages, you'll see that $7 on top of 25 cents is a very small percentage compared to profits and productivity. So I agree with the general sentiment. I just think there's a better mathematical way to frame it, I guess. If you frame it by percentages, it's even worse than you think.
Yeah. Now, are you a proponent for tying wages with inflation?
No, not at all. I am a proponent of tying wages to how that company's stock does, and also to the total target compensation of its executives. So the reason I said total target compensation, executives are paid by stock. So I don't want to tie the wages of the bottom line worker to the wages of the CEO. I want to tie it to how much that person earns. I think inflation is, and I'm not an economics master at all, trust me, but I think inflation is kind of a false target to aim for. I think if we're really looking for a fair world, a world where things work the way they should work, wages should be tied to what the CEO makes. There's no CEO on earth who should be making in a day or an hour or 2 hours or a week what their lowest paid worker makes in a year. That's absurd.
Absolutely.
It's absurd.
So kind of going on the wage thing here a little bit, and being in, HR, obviously, you were in it, to just a couple of weeks ago, basically, how were they dealing with this quote unquote great resignation as far as trying to screen employees? Were they scrambling, or were they just like, oh, we're going to get who we're going to get, or how are they handling that?
Well, I'm going to have to walk you back a bit to answer that question. So sure. I will say the organization I work for and was just laid off from, 4 or 5 years ago, I was the person who ran the report to make sure there was no one in our workforce earning less than $15 an hour. I mean, up until a year or two ago, I could have told you that any one of my retail employees could make 6 figures. We pay very well. Our benefits are ridiculous. You know, they're awesome. And that's all great. However, we did still scramble with this, with the shortage, shortage. For my company specifically, it really wasn't a shortage of workers. We just, as people left, my company made a commitment at the beginning of COVID to not lay anyone off during the pandemic. And
that's good.
Yeah, they kept to it. My job vanished when the pandemic happened. I was hosting 300 to 800 person development programs that had face-to-face meetings. My job went away and they kept paying me for 18 months. It's a great organization. So our scramble is different because our lowest paid employee is still making at minimum $15 an hour. Our retail employees are still probably pulling in on average, I'd say $65,000 an hour. Our scramble was different. So the world opened back up, vaccines happened, things seemed to get better. And suddenly we were like, oh crap, we need more retail employees. We hadn't laid anyone off, but as people quit, we just weren't backfilling them. And I'd like to also state that when we had to shut down, we paid all of our retail employees their full pay for the entire time all the stores were closed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I worked for an excellent organization. So our only issue with the shortage was just because our retail stores had been closed for so long. And as people quit or left or whatever, we weren't backfilling them. Suddenly we found ourselves in a position. We're like, oh shit, customers can come back and we don't have enough employees anymore because we weren't backfilling. So what do we do?
Now, why would you think that? I mean, if the benefits packages were great, and obviously it sounds like the company did right by them during COVID, what would you attribute, losing people to?
So we had a lot of different things going on. We had some people who just did kind of boneheaded things, and I hate to put it that way because I don't want to put it on the employee that they lost their job, but they do weird crap. They're working in New Jersey. We shut down the stores. They moved to Florida. There's a store there that doesn't need headcount and they can't report back to the store they work at. And they chose not to move home. We had a number, more employees than I'd like to count, literally pass away. I mean, it happened. It was a whole thing. It's a retail environment. There's infection spread rates. I actually spent some time on the COVID contact tracing team. It was terrible. Other things some people got very upset that we weren't opening the stores despite government mandates. So they went to other places. It was just regular matriculation. There was no, we didn't see it. What's interesting, we used to see huge rates of turnover for reasons like going back to school, family self-care leave, etc. We saw those term reasons go down and we saw career change go up. So it could possibly be that people were leaving our retail stores to work non-retail, which is fine. I mean, during the time everyone was staying home, we were just giving them full pay. We didn't see really any turnover. It was once they had to come back to the stores, we saw the biggest spike, which I totally get. I wouldn't want to go work retail in a pandemic either. I totally get it. So I guess I'm dancing around your question, but it's not because I'm trying to hide something. It's just I'm not entirely sure what drove it. But it was mostly just natural, people quitting for whatever reasons they would have quit before, except not for family childcare.
Gotcha. All right. So going back to your post, the very first thing that you had said was stop quitting, make them fire you.
Yes.
Now, working in HR,
Mm-hmm.
how much reference checks really get done? Like, for instance, you have an employee just quit.
Yeah.
I know it's reliant on them telling their next employer they worked for you, but did you have to deal with a whole lot of that, like during the pandemic, where people had quit on another company or maybe had left yours and you were getting phone calls, or was that a different division?
So it's different. It's different where I worked because, again, very large organization. We're in the Fortune 20. If I said the name of the company again, you'd know it. So we hire someone outside to do this. So your Targets, your Walmarts, your Amazons, that size company, they're going to follow the same process my company was following.
Did you guys use the work number?
Yes, we use the work number. All the work number reports, all they will report is dates of employment and last title. You can make up whatever crap you want about your previous titles. As long as your last title is correct and your dates of employment are correct, you're cool. The work number also does a thing called salary key. Don't lie about your salary. There are a number of states that won't even ask salary anymore for a lot of legal reasons I won't get into unless you ask me. Don't lie about your salary. Don't lie about your dates. Don't lie about your last title. You can lie about anything else, and we will never know.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of people out there that feel like there's like some database, of
no,
there's not.
Literally, when we do background checks using the work number, we don't even know if someone quit or got fired. We have no idea. We won't release that information either. We don't release term reason. There's no big database. It's all the work number. And all they handle is dates of employment, final title, and salary, but only if you, as the applicant, call in first and approve someone knowing your salary.
Wow. I got some statements that came through here, and I want to get your take on this, being a professional. The Fuck Today says, so my DM told a sick employee who possibly has COVID to go to the doctor, but to not get tested because he couldn't afford for them to be out in quarantine.
Well, your DM's a dick.
Yeah. Now,
that's the whole answer.
Now, from that standpoint, I know there's a fear of going over people's heads, but, let's say that employee reached out to their HR department. In your opinion, how would HR approach that?
Read the scenario back to me again.
DM told a sick employee who possibly has COVID to go to the doctor, but to not get tested because he couldn't afford for them to be out in quarantine.
Okay, so here's where I got stuck is I'm like, well, how's the DM paying for this testing time? He wants the employee, or the non-testing time. He wants the employee to go to the doctor. Is he going to give him PTO for that? Going to count against his asset bank? How much notice? All of that aside, if an employee is sick and they tell their DM, I have symptoms and I'm sick, I would hope, and I'm sure this would be true at my organization, but I have learned through anti-work, I kind of live in an ivory tower. Like, I kind of work for a good company. I would hope the HR person would say, what the fuck, DM? And this is something like employees don't really realize. Like, when your boss is being a big giant dick, like this guy is being, HR comes down like at my company, HR comes down like the hammer on them. They're like, you're supposed to be a leader. Your employee is sick. You want your store to stay open, but you're going to ask this sick employee not to get tested for COVID so they can spread it to everyone else who works in the store. Have you considered the impacts on other people's outlet? What are you doing, DM? That would be like a leadership coaching conversation and probably a number of training classes to correct what the DM did. What would happen to the employee at my company would be entirely different. So the DM would be in a shitstorm of trouble. The employee would be reached out to by HR and said, I'm so sorry you're not feeling well. We've set up a number of free testing sites you can go to. If you can't use one of ours, we'll reimburse you for whatever cost. If there is one, most tests are free now in most states. Don't come to work until we get the test result.
Yeah, I know for me personally, the one thing I really, and it does sound like you had a really, really good gig and you worked for a very reputable company that was doing right, for the most part by their workforce. For
the most part, there were some issues where I was like, you guys aren't doing the right thing here. But for the most part, I feel like my company did well by employees. There were some things where I was like, what are you doing here? Like what's your end game? But like, I look at companies like Walmart and Amazon and even like the small mom and pop shops. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, why are you treating these people like shit?
And it's been my experience. All right. That, most DMs that I've had in my career have been dicks. And it was all about making sure that your store was running enough to their standard that it didn't make them look bad to their RVPs that there was a problem. They wanted the appearance that they were handling their business, and and they would push real hard on the store managers. What's that?
Oh, Steve, did I lose you?
No.
Okay. So I have yes, you're correct. I have a story to share, and I'll just lay this out. So the company I worked for, I sat in headquarters. I was a mid-level manager, not very important, but like as far as FaceTime or whatever, however the hell we're measuring that. But I was the person who did all the analytics and came up with all the strategy that, of course, my director then took credit for. So I worked in an HQ, and it was a regional HQ. So whenever the CEO came in, he would come in every quarter. One time he came into one of our offices and we deployed people. We sent people in 2 days before to paint all the walls because the place was a shithole. But we did it 2 days before so he wouldn't smell the fresh paint smell. Your leaders are painting the turd.
Wow.
Like literally, that's what they're doing. Like your DM is a dick. I'm sure your DM is a dick. But the reason your DM is a dick is your director's a dick. And your director's a dick because the VP's a dick. But at some point in that chain, from director to VP to CVP to C-suite, no one's telling the leadership what's going on.
Oh, that is a beautiful
walked
point.
Into my office and it wasn't painted, he might know it's fucked up. There's some ego in there, in that chain of manager, DM, director, VP, CVP, whatever. There's someone in that chain that can't handle looking bad, which is why your situation doesn't improve.
We had a discussion once before when I was talking about working at the decor store. All right. And the way I saw it for them was, it was a fairly large company and they only had 2 regional vice presidents and they basically split the United States in half. And it was very obvious that the regional vice president was the stopgap to make sure no bad information got to home office, and would do everything in their power to make sure that everybody above him thought everything was just great, but would stop that information flow. It was like at that point, he was beating down on his DMs, say, fix this fucking problem. The DMs were beating people down for no reason. And what you find out is really the DMs weren't doing their job and, got their ass in a sling. And of course, shit rolls downhill and they start blowing out these store managers, to cover their asses. And you're 100% correct because, I met the CEO of the company, super nice guy. And you could tell this guy had no fucking clue what was going on in his stores.
No, they don't. I mean, I castigate the CEOs because I don't think that they are morally correct to take all of the money they take without paying their people better. But when we get to working conditions, I don't think that's on the CEO and the C-suite. That's on some tiny, I am allowed to swear, right?
Yes.
That's on some tiny small dick energy dude or lady in the command chain. The CEO doesn't know what kind of shit you all working in. They might be dicks who are taking way too much money and not paying you enough, but they don't know shit like the hot water. I mean, I was in the executive suite and my hot water didn't work for 6 months, and they just told us all to go down a floor because the lease was up. Because it was too expensive to hire a plumber. Like, it's absurd. Like, if y'all ever get the chance to have the CEO come in and do a round table and your boss coaches you on what to say and what not to say, because they do that right before the CEO comes in, the employees are sat down and said, hey, this is, this is how they do it. Make sure you don't say this, paint all the walls, do that. If you don't tell these CEOs your working conditions, we don't get to blame them for those. So I guess I feel like blame the CEO, working conditions, that's your leadership. It might not be your direct manager. It might not be your DM. It might be your director. I mean, I've seen some ridiculous shit where I'm just like, what the fuck are you doing over there?
Well, I think one of the funniest things, and you kind of touched on this with that statement, is, there was that article about Macy's was going to send corporate people to work into the stores. And everybody's like, ha ha. And I'm like thinking, they're not going to be stocking freight, because what's going to happen is that store manager is going to get a phone call from his DM saying, these people are going to be working in your store. You better make sure this and this and this and this and this is done. And there better not be any problems. So these people from corporate come in, they spend a couple of days there and they go back thinking, well, this ain't so bad, because they didn't see the truth.
No, Steve, they don't even spend time working there. Like, I've gone on those visits. This is what happens. This is what happens. Someone from HQ, it involves some asshole from HR, and they say, hey, make sure the leadership's aware so they know what to expect. So we don't surprise them, because we need leadership to trust us, right? So we don't want to surprise them. And then it comes down like, you better not screw up. And then the executive visitor goes in, they say it's a retail store. They walk into, or a call center. Let's go call center. They walk into a call center. All the walls are freshly painted, but they don't stink anymore. That person might take 1 or 2 pre-screened calls to, let them feel like they did the everyman experience. There's probably going to be a taco bar. Their secretary already told the secretary of the building what their favorite sandwich was. So that's definitely in stock. I literally once had an executive VP of HR who only drank warm Diet Coke, and she would do surprise visits. But every time there was a surprise visit, there would be warm Diet Coke.
Smoke and fucking mirrors.
These people do not see a single thing. And when y'all bitch to your managers, which you should do, at some point in the chain, those complaints stop. You might tell your manager, they're going to coax you into not escalating. You might call your DM. They might raise it to the director. The director's going to say, my VP doesn't want to hear about that.
And then it stops.
And then it stops. It's not like my CEO knows that we once pulled rat traps out of a call center because he was coming for a visit to learn about the everyman. There were rat traps under people's desks.
Wow.
And we pulled them out to hide them.
Wow. That's terrible. That's a new one for me. I got a question for you that came from the chat. Irish Connection asks, what has the biggest influence on the bottom line, employee morale or employee discipline?
Neither. It's employee productivity.
I would agree with that, because if you don't produce, the stores don't hit their goals and people ain't getting paid. The profit's not there.
Yeah. Employee morale. What's very frustrating for me to hear about employee morale versus employee discipline, right? I spent quite a bit of time being the anti-union guy. And I did it a certain way. I was like, hey, if we treat the employees well and we're good to them, and we develop them and get them promotions and pay for their college degrees and do all these things, their morale will naturally be high. I enjoyed my time in that job. I mean, yes, I was a union buster. No, my beliefs didn't really align with what I was doing, but I did find a way to be like, just be good to employees, and then they won't want a union. But then you get into where my company went now, which is entirely different, and I won't talk about, but like employee morale and employee discipline only matter so long as you can retain employees, right? My company, to backfill an employee, cost me $35,000. So if you get paid less than that, I'd rather not fire you. So I'm going to give you 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 warnings, however many it takes to make you get in line. I don't like doing it, though.
So that number you threw out there, that's something I've heard a lot through my career. So was that your average on replacing an employee after you put all the time into training and development and whatnot?
No, that was before training development. Also, I should reference the fact that number is 6 years old for me, because I haven't worked in recruiting strategy for a while. No, that was just the sourcing, finding the person, background check, interview, etc., salary for recruiter, salary for manager, parsed out by time.
Did you guys use the software to like basically pre-screen resumes?
You'll have to be more clear in your question.
We had a guest on one time talking about how there was software out there that when people would like do resumes online or job applications, that basically if you didn't click enough boxes or check enough boxes, so to speak, you would not even get looked at. That there was some sort of...
No, okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off. Yes, I'm familiar. My company did not, but I'm familiar with the software. What we did instead, because there are options here, right? So if you don't, if you apply for a job and it says, I want these things, and you go in and you have choices from drop downs and say it says, I want a 4-year degree and you only have a 2-year degree. And you pick from the drop-down 2-year degree, no, they're not reading your resume.
Right.
If that's what you're getting. They're not even seeing it. It's not even like if all the 4-year degrees wash out, they'll see your 2-year degree. They're never going to look at it. What I would advise, though, and this is only based on my company, obviously liability clauses here, but if you were to apply for the company I'm leaving and say, I have a 4-year degree, and then you get the interview and you get the offer and you get to the background check, and now you're back, and they say, I want to verify everything before your background check, they'll say, you have a 4-year degree? And you can say, no, I have a 2-year degree. And they'll move your box for you. The most critical step, if you're going to lie about shit, is to get it through the interview. But once you get to the background check, correct it all with the recruiter. That person is not paid enough to care.
Right.
The recruiters at my company, which is a well-paying company, are making like $60,000 a year. If you applied with a 4-year degree, but at the background check point, say, I only had a 2-year degree, they don't care. They'll just move your box for you.
Speaking of degrees, I've seen several retail establishments, wanting to hire store leadership and whatnot, requiring 4-year degrees. Now, from a gentleman who has been doing this since he was 18 years old, I find that insulting and horseshit. Why is that?
All right, so here's my theory on this. Again, I'm in my mid 40s, HR for 24 years. I just finished my degree a year and a half ago. So I think degree requirements are entire bullshit. Here's why they do it. And it's very math driven. It's not even like a dickhead move. It's just at the end of the day, up until recently, there were many more applicants than there were jobs available. And there are only so many things you can legally screen someone out for. Do I think a degree has any sort of value? No. And I'm sorry to say that, and I don't mean to offend anyone who worked really hard in college, but I just got my degree a year and a half ago. And 2 years ago, I was learning about Netflix's genius digital marketing plan that involved them mailing new DVDs to people. It's all outdated information. The college degree is not teaching you anything you need to know to be successful in business. However, it is the only thing employers are allowed to filter on legally.
I just think it's a poor look. Because I've seen this happen at places I've worked where you get some broad-eyed, bushy-tailed youngster that got them a 4-year business degree, and they say, "Hey, you've never worked in retail, but we're going to make you a store manager." That has got fail written all over it, and they never last. And it's like, why bother? Why are you not, sourcing? Why are these companies not sourcing, talent? And like to your point, you were involved in sourcing store leadership, correct? Mm-hmm. So what would you look for?
So the company I worked for, or still work for, we didn't hire external leadership. We only promoted people from inside. There are some obviously there will be exceptions there. We brought in executives from outside, but like if you want to lead a store where I work, we don't post retail manager positions externally. Even things like office managers, like me, we're not. Had my job not been eliminated, had I quit, they wouldn't post my job externally. We want people who have been in the trenches.
That's admirable. I wish there was more of that.
Well, this is something I learned from anti-work, because I've always been anti-work. I don't think it's fair that I have to give up a certain percent of my life to make some other person rich just so I can survive. And I feel like that's kind of the backbone of anti-work. Unless I'm reading it wrong, I don't think I should have to work. Like, I'm human. I have these rights. I have, I should get food, medicine, water, and shelter, just because I'm human and here. Like the same way we treat like stray cats, Yeah. So.
You there?
There. Oh, sorry, I got distracted by dogs wrestling.
I understand. I have a house full of cats.
No, hold on one second.
Sure.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
All right, where were we?
Talking about working through the trenches. Not promoting from within and not.
Yeah, I would never. Yes, at my company, we won't hire managers externally at all in the retail space. We might hire some in the business space, but in the retail space, you have to work through the trenches. What's really interesting, though, is Steve, I think I told you about this before we started the call, is like a couple years back when I'm trying to develop people from the front lines to be leaders, I asked if I could spend a month in the store. At my current organization, I had never worked in a retail store. And I'm leading all these people through different trainings, and they're asking me questions about like how to do inventory and the stock room. And I'm like, I have no fucking idea. Right. So I went to my boss and I was like, hey, could I spend like a month, like just in the store, like working with them? And he was like, why would you want to do that? I'm like, because I'm supposed to be like developing them. And if I don't know what they do and what their managers do, I can't really bridge that gap. And he's like, yeah, you don't want to do that. And here's the thing people really don't understand. And I mean, they just really don't, including myself, we really don't get it. Like the people sitting in these meetings and sitting in these boardrooms, most of them have never worked in a retail store in their life. You might have one or two mid-level managers who worked in a store. You might have one or two executives, who like came up with the company. But most of these people are the children of privilege. They're not. I mean, these people don't want to work in the trenches with you. They're also judging you for doing it. Like one time when I was dealing with a union thing, this one manager came out and he's like, hey, if the union's so good to those guys, why is he driving around in a 1987 Astro van?
Wow.
Like, they're horrible people. Like, these it's not just the C-suite. The people in the middle manager suite where I sat, and I'm sorry for sitting there, but I do need to survive. They're terrible people who are judging you.
I mean, does anybody ever like stand up and say, hey, that's a horrible fucking idea. You shouldn't do that to the people in the stores. And if they do, they just get laughed at.
Well, I did that.
And what was their response?
I was told to tone down my perspective. And then I sat quiet for a number of years, and I raised some stink recently about some new rules that came down, and now I'm laid off. So their response generally seems to be, don't bring me those problems.
We're going to do what the fuck we want to do, and we don't care.
Yeah. We have decided, fiscally speaking, the best choice is this, and that's what we're doing.
Wow. That is, so we had another question come through. Said, why do you think years of experience has been devalued in favor of college degree requirements? Or do you think that goes back to what you said, it's just a way for them to screen?
Yes, no, years of experience has not been devalued in favor of college requirements. Years of experience doesn't get hired because they are paid too well. A recent college degree person will take much less money. They might be shit at the job, but they'll learn eventually, and we don't want to pay you 6 figures anymore.
Yep, that's a huge thing right there. They don't want to pay, the years worth of experience, because at that point in time,
and you know what? The only people who suffer are the customers, which are again the same people as the workers. No one cares.
That is terrible.
It doesn't matter if your clerk at the store does a shit job for the big box thing, because you're still going to go to Target. You're still going to go to Walmart. That's going to be a new person. You're going to have sympathy.
Hero asks, do you think it's the looking down upon people that makes them see people as a controllable expense rather than talented investments?
No, I think, unfortunately, we work in a landscape where people are a controllable expense. And what makes them look down on you is they don't understand they are also a controllable expense.
Mm-hmm. Correct. All right. So I want to hit this last one before we get off here. This was from your AMA that you had posted. Mm-hmm. And you said, HR as a function serves to protect the company from litigation, manage the workforce, and advise on strategy issues that will improve metrics and productivity. So by that, Irish had asked the question, basically, to that point, does HR work for corporate, or is HR really working for the employee? Well, present company excluded.
Well, no, HR absolutely works for the company. I mean, when not even present company excluded, I'm paid by the company. So when I go into a meeting with the executives and advise on HR strategy, I'm not generally going to sit there and go, what's going to be best for the employee? Your HR person, your HR rep, the person you see day to day that you bring complaints to, works for the employee or for the employer. What I can tell you though, and none of them wanted to do it. You know, they all thought, I'll go into HR, I'm going to help people. And then you go to those business management classes and those HR degree classes, and you learn, oh no, it's about protecting the company from litigation. So while HR works for the company, they don't want to, they just have to. They have to pay their bills too. I'll also tell you, I have seen your HR reps in the store. We call them HR consultants at my company. The HR reps who go into the store when some manager is just being terrible or when the company policy is bullshit, these people bring those complaints back and they fight hard for the employees. And when they go into your store to tell you that your complaint led to nothing, or to tell you that you have to not sit down at work anymore, or to tell you you've lost your job, they go home at night and they cry. They don't want to do that. These people are making 60, 70 grand a year. They don't want to lay you off. They don't want to tell you can't have a stool. They're fighting for it, and they get told no.
I would think that, and I've said this before, I mean, it doesn't matter what position you hold, but there's always good people and bad people in these positions. And I feel like you just said, most people who really get into HR, they go into it with the mindset that they are there to help people, just like you said.
No, they really think it. They go into it I'm going to help people. I'm going to get them leave. I'm going to get them benefits. I'm going to help them. I'm going to protect them. And then you get there and they're like, oh no, we just have to figure out how to maximize the resources that happen to be human for profit. Yeah, but if you won't agree to that, we'll stop paying you.
Right. And do you think there's been a lot of turnover in HR because of, I guess, for lack of a better term, the people like that who get into the business realize it's not that way, and they kind of see it as a moral dilemma and they try to get out? It's kind of similar to being a store manager, really, in a way.
Yeah. Well, I'd say up until COVID, no. Most people just kind of, like everyone else when I had to work, right? We just kind of accepted this is what we had to do to get along. Over the past year and a half, I mean, HR, finance, marketing, all those things, those are low turnover things. What we call low turnover where I work, we're talking, I used to be looking at 1.5% annualized turnover for HR, finance, marketing, et cetera. Now I'm looking more like 20.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. They're not just leaving the company though. I factor in when I do this, leaving for other jobs. I've seen a lot of HR people leaving for operations, how to make things work better. The person who figures out who changes your light bulb in the store. I've seen a lot of that movement.
I would also think that with the pandemic, I mean, that unfortunately magnified the worst in a lot of industries and a lot of people. And I would imagine that you would have people that have taken some of the skills that they've learned in HR, like you said, and ventured into something else because it became an eye-opening experience when some of these companies, really didn't care. what was going on with their workforce?
So I didn't see a lot of that because, again, my company just kind of refused to lay anyone off during the pandemic. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh, they took the trash out.
My neighbor actually. Dogs. Hey, stop. I would say at my company, no. But one thing I've learned from anti-work is I work in a very different place. Like, so my company was terrible a few years ago, and probably about 3 or 4 years back, our CEO, who was American, was replaced by European, and then the entire C-suite got replaced. The Americans were replaced by Europeans, and suddenly they were just throwing money at us. Like, they were like, "Oh, you work a lot. Here's more money." And so it's hard for me to answer the question just because I feel like during the pandemic, I had European leadership, which is different.
Right. We'll end on this question because I think this is the best one. Irish Connection asks, what is the biggest misconception about human resources?
Well, so the biggest misconception about it is that we're corporate cops. And I understand some of us are. But when we have to do that, if we're corporate cops against the managers, I mean, so in my company, probably 5% of HR headcount is dedicated to employee relations, the corporate cop job. But they're busting the managers. We don't give a shit about your attendance. We don't even care. Like, finance cares about your attendance. Your manager cares about your attendance. We don't care. We're not these headhunters. We're not. When we have to lay you guys off, which we don't want to do, it's only because finance sent us a list and said, lay off these people. You have the conversations. Wow. We aren't laying you off. We aren't firing you. When your manager touches your butt and we can't prove it and we have to keep employing him, even though we know that guy's a fucking scumbag, it breaks us.
That is, look, I wouldn't wish your job on anybody. I mean, honestly, I got to think
I wouldn't wish the retail manager job on anyone. It's a terrible job.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. Well, I take that back. When you're younger and your body's not physically broken and you think you can go 1,000,000 miles an hour, it was tolerable. But when you start getting older and jaded and realize how shitty people are, yeah, it gets kind of bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing. I mean, to your point, getting a call from HR, saying you need to let such and such person go, like we discussed before we went live. It's not that we want to do that. It's, or like you said, having to cut people's hours and things like that. These are not decisions. We don't want to do any of
that. Yeah. Like, my only involvement in layoffs, and I am kind of complicit here, right? Because I had some analyst time. So when finance sent the spreadsheet down and said, pick who to lay off, I'd do some math and draw a line in the spreadsheet. I was definitely that guy who said, here are your people, because finance said this many. And I waited.
But you looked at it from an analytical standpoint, though.
Well, I had to. I would block out employee IDs, names. I was doing finance. And then this last few rounds, my entire job this was actually really sad, and I really hated doing it. Once someone else had drawn the line, because I got promoted, so I didn't have to, I was leading some webinars on how to find internal jobs for these people we have laid off. So we have these open positions. They're welcome to apply. And I'm sitting here like, no. And we flag them as laid off. And the managers are supposed to read that as hire, put this person in the job so you don't lose the money. And they read it as, what a jackass. No, I'm not hiring that guy.
Wow. That's awful. Well,
yeah, it's pretty awful.
So how long of a break do you have before you have to get back at it?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm kind of like, I don't know. I don't think I want to go back. Like, I kind of figured out different states I could live in where I could buy land cheap and just not do it anymore. But I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to corporate America. Like, I don't like it. They're all terrible people. Like, the executives are clueless and the middle management is judging you. And I just don't think I want to work there anymore. So, but I'm not sure I have a choice. I'm a type 1 diabetic and I have to afford insulin and I live in the US. So
which is a nightmare in itself right there.
Yeah, I can't even get into it. Like, I'm a wage slave. I know I'm this scary HR manager, but I mean, I die in like 3 to 7 days if you take my insulin away, and the shit's like $200 to $700 a bottle, and I use a bottle a week. Like
that's something that just needs to fucking change. That's awful.
It's never going to change. The reason health coverage is tied to jobs is if it's not tied to jobs, we don't have to be their slaves anymore.
Ooh, that is very well put. So that you have to be in the workforce or you die, basically.
Well, if you're me.
Well, not just you, many other people.
Maybe if you're a young, strapping 20 to 25-year-old with no pre-existing conditions, maybe you can go do the van life thing. But if you're me, I mean, my medicine's $200 to $700 a bottle.
Yeah,
I have to work for them.
That's just eventually we're going to. Would you be having been in HR? So you've dealt a pretty good bit with health benefits and things like that.
Oh yes.
So would you be willing to come back sometime soon and let's just do an episode talking about how shitty health benefits are and whatnot that you get as an employee?
Oh yeah, I'm in.
Oh, that would be great. And, we had an episode with a former pharmacist on here and, he was talking about basically the drug prices are just manufactured numbers, and some of the stuff that he was coming up with was just like frightening as hell. So, but,
I'm sorry about the dogs.
Oh, it's okay. But thank you so much for being on tonight. I will be in touch with you. If kind of like in your off time, if you've got kind of like an angle you would like to go on as far as the benefits go, kind of put it together and let me know. And
all my time is off time, so.
Oh, I got you. And then kind of chart out what you would like to talk about, and we'll do this again because I'd love to do one on health benefits.
Oh yeah, no, I'm there. Oh, I should tell you, one of my HR jobs, other than being a type 1 diabetic and working in HR, I was HR for a benefits company.
Ooh. Okay, so it's a date. We'll figure this out because there are several people in the chat that we've had discussions offline wanting to do an episode like that, and I think we got our winner here.
Yeah, no, I am in for that. And Steve, thank you so much for bringing me on. I'm sorry about the dogs.
Oh, it's okay. We've had dogs, we've had children, we've had cats. Like I said, we don't lipstick on the pig here. It is what it is.
All right.
Awesome. So thank you, Jenny, for being here. Guys, next Wednesday, we're going to be talking about Dollar Tree, Dollar General, Family Dollar, how dollar stores exploit urban and low income neighborhoods. So that's going to be fun. If you haven't checked it out, go check out Don't Be a Karen this year, our Christmas song. So that's a lot of fun. And thank you again, Jenny, for being here. We'll get the benefits thing lined up, and everybody, we will see you next time.